Aisha Khan had never lived an easy life. She grew up in a small neighborhood where people talked more than they worked, where every decision a girl made was watched, judged, and often questioned. Her home was modest. Her family lived with limited resources, but they carried strong values: respect, courage, and honesty. From a young age, Aisha felt something different inside her. While other girls played with dolls, she climbed trees, ran races with boys, and dreamed of doing something bigger than the world around her expected. Her father was a quiet, hard-working man who drove long hours just to provide for the family. Aisha admired him deeply. He often told her, "Strength is not in muscles. It is in patience." Those words stayed in her heart. Her mother, gentle but firm, always tried to protect Aisha from the harshness of society's judgments. She worried that her daughter's dreams would bring trouble, because in their neighborhood, a girl wanting a challenging path was considered strange. But Aisha didn't want an ordinary life. She didn't want to sit at home doing chores all day, or spend her life waiting for approval from people who never understood her. She felt restless, like she was meant for something greater, something that required courage and discipline. And one day she found the answer. She watched a military parade on television. The way the soldiers marched in sync, the way their uniforms shined under the sun, the way their faces looked focused and proud. Something stirred inside her. She imagined herself standing among them, wearing the same uniform, marching with the same determination. She decided that day she would join the military. When she announced her decision at home, her parents stared at her in shock. Her mother's hands froze in the middle of folding clothes. Her father looked at her with worried eyes. They had never thought their daughter would choose such a difficult path. It wasn't common. It wasn't easy. It wasn't safe. And it certainly wasn't accepted by the people around them. Outside the home, the news spread quickly. In their neighborhood, information traveled faster than wind. Some people laughed. Some whispered. Some openly criticized. One woman from down the street said, "A girl like her will break in 2 days." A group of young men mocked her when she walked past, saying, "She thinks she's tough, but she's just a weak woman." Aisha heard every word, but she refused to respond. She kept her chin up, walked past them with steady steps, and stayed focused on her goal. Inside, she felt a mix of anger and determination. She wasn't hurt by their words. She was fueled by them. If anything, their doubt made her stronger. The day she went to submit her application, she stood in front of the recruitment office with shaking hands. It wasn't fear that made them shake, but excitement. She felt like this was the first real step toward her future. The officer at the desk looked at her, surprised to see such a small, quiet girl standing with such confidence. He asked if she was sure. She nodded without hesitation. After the initial tests, she learned that she had passed. She was officially accepted into the training program. When she told her parents, her mother cried. Not out of disappointment, but out of fear and pride mixed together. Her father placed his hand on her shoulder and said with a soft smile, "If this is your path, walk it with courage." Before leaving for training, she walked through her neighborhood one last time. The same people who mocked her stood and stared. Some still whispered, some still doubted. But Aisha felt something inside her shift. She no longer cared about their approval. She no longer felt small or limited by their opinions. She was stepping into a new world, one where her strength, not their judgment, would define her. As she packed her small bag, she looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes reflected determination. Her posture was straight. She didn't look like a weak woman. She looked like someone ready to challenge every assumption people had ever made about her. She whispered to herself, "This is my beginning." When she finally boarded the military transport bus, she felt like the air around her changed. The world she was leaving behind was full of doubt and negativity. The world she was entering was full of tests, challenges, and opportunities. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew she would face harsh conditions, strict instructors, and long days of exhaustion. But she also knew she had something inside her that no amount of mocking could break. Aisha didn't join the military to prove people wrong. She joined to prove herself right, to show that her dreams mattered, that her strength was real, and that she deserved to walk a path of honor and courage. And with that belief burning quietly in her heart, Aisha's journey truly began. The moment Aisha stepped off the transport bus and onto the training ground, she felt the weight of a completely new world. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and discipline. Loud whistles echoed across the field. Recruits ran in straight lines while instructors shouted commands with sharp voices. Everything looked tough, intense, and completely different from the quiet streets she had grown up on. She adjusted her small bag on her shoulder and walked toward the registration line. Her heart beat fast, not because she was scared, but because this was the moment she had imagined for so long. She wanted to belong here. She wanted to prove to herself that she was strong enough. But her arrival did not go unnoticed. A few recruits in the line turned their heads as she approached. Their expressions changed from curiosity to judgment. Some whispered, some smirked. One girl raised her eyebrows as if saying, "What is she doing here?" A tall boy snorted loudly and nudged his friend, clearly making fun of her. Aisha ignored them and kept her eyes forward. When the instructor reached her, he looked at her for a moment, scanning her from head to toe. She could tell he was evaluating her strength, her courage, her spirit. He didn't smile. "Name?" he barked. "Aisha Khan," she replied firmly. He pointed toward the recruits area. "Fall in line." She stepped into the crowd of trainees, all dressed in the same uniform, but clearly not all sharing the same mindset. Some stood with straight backs and proud expressions. Others looked tired already. And then there were those who looked at her as if she didn't belong. During the first drill, the instructor shouted for everyone to stand at attention. Aisha tried her best to copy the stance of the others. Feet together, hands by the sides, eyes forward. She wasn't perfect, but she gave her full effort. That's when she heard it, her first direct insult. A boy behind her whispered loudly, "Look at her. She won't last a week. She's just a weak woman." His friend laughed quietly. Maybe she joined because she thought training would be like a gym class. Aisha felt her jaw tighten. For a moment, she wanted to turn around and respond. But she remembered her father's words, "Real strength is in patience." So she stayed silent, focusing on the instructor's commands, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. The training began aggressively. The recruits were ordered to do push-ups, then sit-ups, then long-distance running. Sweat poured down everyone's foreheads. The sun burned hot overhead. Aisha struggled, but she pushed through every movement with determination. When they ran laps around the field, she fell behind at first. The boy who insulted her ran past and laughed. "Told you, weak woman." But she didn't stop. Her legs burned, her breathing became heavy, but she kept moving. She told herself, "If they run, I run. If they push harder, I push harder." After the run, they were taken to the obstacle course. Mud pits, tall walls, narrow planks. Everything was built to break a person's spirit. When it was her turn to climb the rope wall, the same group watched her, waiting to see her fail. "Bet she can't even get halfway," one of them said, loud enough for her to hear. Aisha grabbed the rope with trembling hands. She pulled herself up slowly, her arms screaming in pain. Halfway up, her grip almost slipped. She heard laughter behind her, but she held on. Inch by inch, she climbed until she reached the top. When she came down the other side, she didn't look at them, but she saw their expressions: surprised, annoyed, confused. Throughout the day, the instructors pushed them harder. They wanted to see who would break, who would cry, who would quit. Aisha refused to be any of those. At lunchtime, the recruits gathered around, eating in small groups. Some talked loudly, some complained about the heat. Aisha sat alone at a corner table. She didn't mind. She preferred quiet. But even from a distance, she heard whispers about her. "She's too thin. She looks tired already. She won't make it." Their words were sharp, but none of them pierced her heart. Instead, every insult became fuel. She ate slowly, replaying the day in her mind, thinking about how she could improve. Later in the evening, when they had a short break, She sat on her bed in the barracks and massaged her sore arms. Around her, some trainees laughed and joked, while others continued staring at her with doubt. But Aisha kept her focus. She told herself, they don't know me. They only see what they want to see. I will show them who I truly am. As she lay down to sleep, the lights dimmed, and silence filled the room. She stared at the ceiling, her muscles aching, her mind tired. But inside her chest, something stronger than pain and exhaustion burned. She didn't come here to be liked. She didn't come to prove them wrong. She came to prove herself right. And she knew that the real challenge was just beginning. The next few days at the training camp were nothing less than a storm for Aisha. Every morning started before sunrise. A loud whistle would cut through the air, and the recruits had to jump out of their beds and rush outside within seconds. For many, it felt impossible. For Aisha, it felt like her body was still asleep even while she was running toward the parade ground. Her muscles were constantly sore. Her legs felt heavy from the long runs, and her arms trembled each time she tried to do push-ups. She had never faced physical challenges like this before. She wasn't naturally strong, and she knew it. But she also knew that strength wasn't something a person was born with, it was something they built, piece by piece, day by day. Still, the beginning was tough. During the morning endurance run, she always ended up in the middle or near the back of the group. The boys who had mocked her earlier made sure to pass her loudly, laughing or shaking their heads as if she were a mistake in the system. Even some girls looked at her with doubt, thinking she couldn't keep up. One day, during a 5-kilometer run, Aisha's legs felt like fire. Every step hurt. Her throat was dry. Her breathing was uneven. She could hear the instructor shouting from the front, "Keep moving. No one stops. No excuses." Aisha wanted to stop. Her heart begged her to sit down. But something stronger pushed her forward, her belief that quitting wasn't an option. So she kept running, focusing on her breath, one painful step at a time. When she finally crossed the finish line, she collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The same boy who called her weak woman walked past and smirked. "Barely made it," he muttered. Aisha didn't reply. She simply tied her shoelace tighter and stood up again. The instructors were strict, but they were fair. They didn't care if a recruit was a man or a woman. They cared about effort, discipline, and improvement. They watched everyone closely, including Aisha. They saw her struggle, but they also saw her refuse to give up. That mattered. After the run, they moved to strength training. Push-ups, planks, sit-ups, and lifting sandbags. Aisha wasn't the best at any of it. Her arms shook during push-ups. Her stomach burned during sit-ups. Her shoulders ached from carrying sandbags across the field. But she tried every single time. While others groaned and complained, she stayed silent and focused. She worked hard even when no one was watching. And slowly, very slowly, small changes began to appear. She could hold a plank position for a few seconds longer. She could lift the sandbag without needing extra support. Her posture became steadier. Her breathing became controlled. She started waking up a few minutes earlier than everyone else to stretch and warm up her body. At night, instead of chatting with the others, she practiced her push-ups quietly in the corner of the barracks. She wasn't the strongest, but she was becoming one of the most disciplined. One evening, during a drill where they had to crawl under low wires across a patch of muddy ground, Aisha found herself stuck behind a recruit who froze in panic. The instructors shouted for everyone to keep crawling, but the girl in front of her couldn't move. Aisha gently tapped her shoulder and whispered, "I'm right behind you. It's okay. Just look forward and move slowly." The girl nodded shakily and continued crawling. Because of that delay, Aisha finished the drill later than others. Some recruits laughed, assuming she was slow, but the instructors saw what really happened. They saw her patience and her teamwork, qualities that mattered even more than strength. Her attitude impressed them, even if the other recruits didn't notice it yet. One night, when the lights were out and everyone was lying in bed, Aisha overheard two girls whispering about her. "I thought she'd cry by now," one said. The other replied softly, "She's tougher than she looks." It wasn't praise exactly, But it was the first time Aisha heard something that wasn't an insult. It gave her a small spark of motivation. Over the next days, she kept showing up early. She kept pushing her limits. She kept reminding herself why she was here. Every pain in her body became a reminder that she was growing stronger. The instructors finally started noticing her more clearly. One of them, a strict but fair officer, walked past her during a drill and said quietly, "Good effort. Keep it up." It was a simple sentence, but to Aisha it felt like a medal. The other recruits began noticing her too. They saw how she never argued, never complained, never quit. Some of them still mocked her, but even their insults were becoming less confident. Because deep inside they were starting to sense something, that maybe the girl they had underestimated was not weak at all. Maybe she was stronger than any of them expected. Maybe she was stronger than even she knew. And as part 3 ends, Aisha is still fighting, still learning, still growing. But something important has begun. The camp is slowly realizing she is not someone who can be broken. She is someone who will rise. The 4th week of training arrived, and by then, everyone at camp was exhausted. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. The instructors had increased the difficulty level of every drill. Runs were longer, obstacles were higher, and the expectations were tougher. No one had the energy to joke anymore. Even the loudest recruits now spoke softly, saving their strength for the endless challenges. Aisha felt the exhaustion more than anyone, but she had also grown stronger. Her body no longer collapsed after every drill. Her breathing had become steadier, and she could push herself further than before. She still wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but she had become someone the instructors noticed. Quiet, determined, and impossible to break. One morning, the recruits were informed that they would be facing one of the hardest endurance tests in the entire training program. It was a long, multi-stage challenge designed to push them to their limits. It involved running, crawling, climbing, lifting, and navigating through rough terrain. The sun was already hot, and everyone knew this test was going to be brutal. As they lined up at the starting point, the instructors reminded them, "This is not just a physical test. It is a test of your mind, your strength, your spirit. Let's see who can endure." The whistle blew. Immediately, the recruits burst forward. The first stage was a long-distance run across the open field. Dust lifted under their feet as they ran. Some started fast, trying to get ahead. Others paced themselves, saving energy for later. Aisha ran somewhere in the middle of the group. Her breathing was controlled, but each step felt heavy. Sweat dripped down her face, and her legs burned, but she kept moving. Halfway through the run, she noticed a male recruit stumbling. He was one of the boys who had mocked her during the first week. His face was pale and he could barely stand. Aisha hesitated for a moment. Should she stop for him? He had been cruel to her. He had laughed at her. He had called her weak. But her heart didn't allow her to ignore him. She slowed down, grabbed his arm, and helped him stay on his feet. "Come on," she said, breathless but firm. "You can't stop now. Keep moving." Slowly. He was too tired to respond, but he nodded. With her support, he found enough strength to keep running until he could rejoin the group. Aisha didn't stay with him. She didn't want credit or recognition. She simply continued running, focusing on her own pace. The second stage was a crawling course under low wires. The ground was muddy and full of sharp stones. Recruits had to crawl on their elbows and knees, keeping their bodies low to avoid hitting the wires. It was painful and tough. Aisha's elbows scraped against the rough ground, sending sharp stings through her arms, but she didn't stop. The third stage involved climbing a steep wooden wall. Many recruits struggled here. The wall was tall and slippery from the sweat of those who tried before them. Aisha's arms shook as she pulled herself upward. She nearly lost her grip halfway, but she planted her foot on a small plank and pushed with all her strength. With a final effort, she made it to the top. As she climbed down the other side, she saw something that made her pause. 2 trainees had collapsed near the base of the wall. One was a girl who had mocked Aisha earlier in the week. The other was a quiet boy who rarely spoke. Both were exhausted, dehydrated, and unable to stand. The instructors were far away, monitoring other parts of the test. Aisha could have walked past. It wasn't her responsibility. In fact, helping them might slow her down and affect her performance. But her instinct was stronger than her logic. She rushed to them, kneeling between the two. "Are you okay?" she asked. The girl shook her head weakly. I can't move." The boy whispered, "I'm dizzy." Aisha quickly stood up, grabbed the boy's arm and helped him sit upright. Then she offered her water bottle to the girl. "Drink slowly," she said. The girl drank, her hands trembling. Aisha then supported both of them, encouraging them to stand. The boy managed to get up with her help, but the girl struggled. Took time and patience, but Aisha didn't give up. Eventually, both recruits were able to walk again. "Thank you," the girl said softly, her voice breaking. Aisha nodded. "We're all here to finish, not to leave each other behind." When Aisha finally reached the end of the endurance test, she was much later than many others, but she didn't care. She had helped two people finish something they might have failed alone. The instructors, however, had seen everything. They watched how she helped the boy who insulted her. They saw how she stopped to assist the two collapsed recruits. They observed her strength, not just physical but emotional and moral. After the test, one of the instructors walked up to her and said, "You did well today. Very well." It wasn't loud praise. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. And for the first time, some recruits looked at her with something she had never seen in their eyes before: respect. They didn't speak it out loud yet, but they felt it. Aisha had shown them something none of them expected. That true strength wasn't about muscles, speed, or loud words. It was about heart. And Aisha had more heart than any of them realized. The days after the endurance test felt different for Aisha. Something had shifted in the air. The same recruits who once laughed at her now watched her with curious eyes. They didn't say it out loud, but their behavior had changed. They no longer whispered insults behind her back, and some even moved aside slightly when she passed, as if giving her space out of silent respect. But Aisha didn't let any of this distract her. She understood one thing clearly. This training wasn't over, and the challenges ahead would be even harder. She had improved a lot, but she knew she still had a long way to go. Training continued with a new intensity. The instructors increased the difficulty of every task. They pushed the recruits through grueling obstacle courses, long marches with heavy bags, and daily drills that left everyone gasping for breath. Some recruits complained. Some groaned. Some even thought about quitting. Aisha didn't complain once. Every morning, before the sun rose, she woke up a few minutes earlier than everyone else. She stretched her muscles, drank water, and mentally prepared herself for the day. This small habit made her feel stronger and more focused. Her running improved the most. At the beginning of training, she struggled with long distances. She used to fall behind, her breath uneven and her legs shaking. But now she could keep a steady pace. She still wasn't the fastest, but she was no longer the slowest either. And she never stopped, no matter how tired she got. During one morning run, something surprising happened. The boy who once called her a weak woman ran beside her for a moment. He didn't mock her. In fact, he said nothing at all. But the lack of insults felt like progress. After a few seconds, he moved ahead, but Aisha noticed the slight nod he gave her. A small gesture, but meaningful. The shooting range became another area where Aisha began to shine. In the early days, she had struggled with stance, grip, and aim. Her shots were scattered across the target. But with consistent practice, her focus sharpened. She learned how to control her breathing, how to align her body, and how to stay steady even when her hands trembled from exhaustion. One afternoon, an instructor stood behind her as she prepared to fire. She steadied her rifle, inhaled slowly, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. The bullet hit close to the center. The instructor nodded. "Good. Again." She repeated the shot. Another near-perfect hit. "Better," he said. Aisha felt a quiet pride grow inside her. She didn't smile, but her eyes reflected confidence she had never felt before. The shooting range became a place where she felt her strength clearly, where her patience, discipline, and focus all came together. Later that week, the recruits faced strategy drills, team exercises where they had to plan moves, communicate clearly, and execute tasks with precision. Most recruits struggled with coordination. Some shouted over each other. Some ignored instructions. But Aisha observed everything with calm eyes. When it was her team's turn, she listened to everyone's ideas, spoke clearly, and helped create a simple plan. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a confidence that made others stop and listen. She guided the group through the drill with surprising clarity. Even those who once disliked her followed her lead without hesitation. By the end of the drill, her team finished faster and more accurately than several others. As they walked back, one of the girls whispered, "She's actually really good at this." Another recruit replied, "She's sharp. Didn't expect that from her." People were finally seeing the real Aisha, not the girl they judged on day one, but the strong, determined recruit who refused to quit. The instructors saw it even more clearly. They reviewed performance charts daily, and Aisha's name kept rising. Not because she was the fastest or strongest, but because she was consistent, focused, and improving every single day. One instructor commented during a briefing, "Khan is showing exceptional growth. Keep an eye on her." Their attention didn't make her arrogant. Instead, it made her even more humble and determined. A few days later, during a break, something unexpected happened. A group of recruits sat together, exhausted after a long drill. Aisha walked past them quietly, heading to refill her water bottle. The girl who once doubted her called out softly, "Hey, good job today." Aisha paused, surprised. She nodded politely and continued walking. She didn't need praise. She didn't expect admiration. But it felt good to be acknowledged, not as someone weak, not as someone out of place, but as a fellow trainee. Slowly, everything around her began to change. People started asking her small questions during drills. "How do you keep your balance while shooting?" Or, "What pace do you use for running?" She answered calmly, sharing whatever she knew. She didn't act like a leader, but she was becoming one naturally. Her confidence grew every single day. Not loud confidence, not showy confidence. Just a quiet strength that made her walk taller and move with purpose. Meanwhile, the mocking voices that once surrounded her had faded completely. Silence replaced insults. Respect replaced jokes. Even the recruits who still didn't talk to her had stopped underestimating her. Aisha had risen above every challenge, every insult, every doubt. She had become someone people looked at differently. Not because her muscles had grown, but because her courage had. Little did she know, the real test of leadership was still waiting for her in the days ahead. And when that moment came, she would show everyone just how strong a weak woman could truly be. Part 6 began with a kind of silence that felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Serena lay in her bunk that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of the day, her victory, the whispered disbelief, and the uneasy glances from the recruits who once called her weak. For the first time, she was beginning to truly understand something. Winning respect was harder than winning any physical challenge. Respect wasn't earned in one moment. It was tested again and again. Before sunrise, the loud whistle blasted across the barracks. Everyone jumped up immediately. Another day of training. Another day where she had to prove she deserved to be there. Not just once, but every single second. The recruits gathered on the field, and this time the mood felt different. They weren't openly mocking her. They weren't laughing, but they watched her carefully, some with curiosity, some with resentment. A few looked angry, like her success had somehow threatened their pride. Serena felt all of it, but she kept her focus straight ahead. The instructor arrived, his face serious as always. "Today," he announced, "is the endurance gauntlet. Only discipline, mental strength, and heart will get you through. Quitting is not an option." The gauntlet was famous, brutal, long, and designed to break even the toughest recruits. Already tired from the week's training, many recruits looked nervous. Serena took a slow breath. She had trained for years to reach this moment. Pain didn't scare her anymore. The whistle blew. They started with a steep hill run carrying weighted packs. Every step burned. The wind felt harsh. Serena pushed through, her breath steady, her steps controlled. A few male recruits rushed ahead, trying to prove they were faster. One even glanced back at her with a smirk, as if to say, "See? You don't belong here." But Serena didn't chase him. She didn't need to. She had learned that endurance wasn't about speed, it was about refusing to stop. Halfway up the hill, the smirking recruit slowed down, then stopped completely, clutching his side. Serena passed him silently. He looked shocked. How could she still be running strong? She kept going. Next came the mud crawl. The ground was cold and wet, the mud thick like glue. Barbed wire stretched low above their backs. Serena dropped to her stomach and crawled forward. Mud splashed into her face, sticking to her hair and uniform. Her elbows scraped against rocks hidden under the surface, but she kept moving. Around her, the other recruits groaned, cursed, or slowed down. A few reached out to push themselves ahead, only to get tangled under the wire, their frustration growing. Serena kept her head low, moved with purpose, and made no sound except her steady breathing. Every movement was controlled. Every inch forward was earned. One recruit beside her tried to shove past her, but his foot slipped. His knee knocked into Serena's arm, sending pain shooting up her shoulder. He didn't apologize. He just kept scrambling forward, desperate not to lose. Serena winced, but didn't stop. Pain, she had learned, was familiar, something she could live with. Then came the rope climb. It was tall, stretching high into the sky. Many recruits looked up and swallowed hard. Their arms shook from earlier challenges. Sweat dripped down their faces. Serena grabbed the rope and started climbing. Her movements were smooth and practiced. She pulled with her arms and pushed with her legs. Halfway up, she felt her shoulder protest again, the same one that had taken the hit during the mud crawl. The pain shot through her muscles, sharp and deep. She paused for just a breath. Below her, she heard whispers. "She's slowing down." Knew it. She was lucky earlier. "She's not that strong." Their voices tried to crawl into her mind, but she refused to let them in. She gritted her teeth, tightened her grip, and pushed upward. The rope burned against her palms. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her shoulder felt like it might tear. But she didn't stop. When she reached the top and rang the metal plate, a loud, clear sound echoed across the field. A few recruits gasped. Even the instructor raised an eyebrow. Serena descended with the same calm focus. The final challenge was the sandbag carry. By now, everyone was breathing heavily. The sandbags were heavy, almost as heavy as her own body weight. The recruits groaned as soon as they lifted them. Serena bent down, gripped the bag, and hoisted it over her shoulders. Her arms shook. Her legs burned. She could feel the weight pressing into the bruise on her shoulder, but she kept moving. Each step felt like walking through fire. Recruits around her stumbled. Some dropped their bags halfway. Others stopped to rest, panting, struggling to get up again. Serena kept walking. Her pace was slow but steady. Her mind repeated the same quiet words. Keep going, keep going, keep going. When she crossed the finish line, she didn't raise her hands or celebrate. She simply let the sandbag fall to the ground and stood silently, catching her breath. The recruits watched her with a mixture of shock and respect that they didn't want to admit. No one called her weak now. No one laughed. No one jeered. The instructor stepped forward, looking directly into her eyes. "Impressive," he said quietly. "Very impressive." For the first time, she saw something new in his expression, approval. And for Serena, that meant everything. Began with a strange feeling in the training camp. For the first time since Serena arrived, whispers weren't filled with insults or laughter. Instead, they carried a quiet tone, surprise, curiosity, and something else she had never heard from them before, respect. But respect didn't always come peacefully. When people's pride is shaken, their reactions change. Some recruits who used to mock her now avoided looking at her. Others stared with narrowed eyes, clearly bothered that she had outperformed them not once, but again and again. Serena noticed all of it, but she didn't let it control her. She woke before dawn as usual, laced her boots, tied her hair, and stood in formation like every other day. But deep inside, she felt a shift. Something was building. Something was coming. And she was right. The instructor stepped forward that morning with a more serious expression than usual. "Today we test leadership," he announced. "Not strength, not speed. Leadership." A murmur moved through the recruit line. Leadership tests were famous for exposing a person's true character under pressure. It wasn't enough to survive. You had to guide others, solve problems, and make choices that affected the entire team. Most recruits glanced confidently at one another. They assumed Serena would struggle. In their minds, she was strong but quiet, too quiet to lead. The instructor continued, "We are dividing you into small units. One person from each unit will act as the team leader. That leader must guide the team through a tactical rescue mission." The groups were formed randomly. Serena found herself placed with 4 recruits who had never treated her kindly. One of them, Malik, had mocked her loudly on the very first day. Another, Trevor, still looked uncomfortable even standing near her. The instructor walked along the line, choosing leaders. One by one, names were called. When he reached Serena's group, he pointed straight at her. You're the leader for Unit 4. Her team's expressions dropped instantly. Malik muttered under his breath, "Seriously? We're following her." Trevor sighed loudly, shaking his head. Another recruit looked irritated, like the day was already ruined. Serena heard all of it, but she didn't respond. She simply nodded to the instructor. The mission began with a briefing. Unit 4 was tasked with navigating through the forest, locating a wounded soldier, and bringing him back to base safely while avoiding detection from simulated enemy patrols. The scenario was designed to test teamwork, planning, and quick decision-making. As soon as the instructor walked away, Malik crossed his arms. "Look, just stay out of our way," he said. "We'll figure this out." Serena remained calm. "We won't complete the mission if we argue. Let's focus on the plan." Trevor scoffed. "What plan? You're just..." Before he could finish, Serena laid out her strategy. She spoke clearly, not loudly, but her voice carried a certain confidence that made them pause. She explained the safest paths through the forest, the lookout points where enemy patrols were likely placed, and how each person's strengths could be used effectively. She even pointed out wind direction, sunlight position, and natural cover. By the time she finished, the group was silent. Trevor blinked. "How do you know all that?" Serena shrugged slightly. "I study. I observe." It wasn't bragging. It was a simple truth. With no better plan available and no time to waste, they agreed to follow her. Unit 4 moved into the forest. Serena led them with controlled steps, stopping to signal when she heard distant movement. At one point, Malik was about to walk straight into an open clearing where an enemy lookout was waiting. Serena grabbed his sleeve at the last second and pulled him back behind a tree. He froze, realizing how close he came to compromising the mission. He whispered, Thanks." They kept moving. Halfway through the mission, they heard a distress signal, the sound indicating the hidden, wounded soldier. When they reached him, they found a heavy training dummy weighing almost as much as a real person. The team immediately argued about who should carry it. Everyone was exhausted, and tempers rose again. Serena stepped forward. "We carry together. One person leads, 2 support the weight, 1 stays on lookout." It was simple, clear, effective, and for once no one argued. They lifted the dummy and continued slowly through the woods. Serena constantly checked their surroundings, using hand signals instead of speaking, helping them avoid 2 simulated patrols and 1 booby trap area. Then, near the final checkpoint, they heard footsteps approaching, an enemy patrol. If they were caught, the mission would fail. Trevor whispered nervously, "We're done. We can't hide, all of us." Serena scanned the area quickly, spotted a narrow trench hidden by thick bushes, and motioned for them to follow her. It was tight, uncomfortable, and muddy, but it hid them completely. They held their breath as the patrol passed less than 5 meters away. No one moved until the footsteps disappeared. When they finally reached the base, they were certain they had barely passed. Instead, the instructor stood waiting with a rare smile. "Unit 4, he said, is the first to complete the mission. Very impressive work." The recruits looked stunned. Some smiled sheepishly. Malik glanced at Serena with an expression she had never seen on his face. Respect mixed with regret. "Serena," he said quietly, "you led us well." For the first time, they weren't mocking her. They weren't doubting her. They weren't laughing at her. They were finally seeing her strength, not just physical but mental, strategic, and calm under pressure. And little did they know, this was only the beginning of the moment that would make the entire base freeze in awe. Part 8 began with a silence that felt different from every other day. The air in the training ground was tense, as if everyone knew something important was about to happen. Serena stood in formation with the other recruits, her uniform dusty from the final training drills, her muscles aching from the long week, but her eyes steady. She didn't know what was coming, only that it felt significant. The instructor walked in front of the line, his boots hitting the ground sharply. Behind him, several senior officers appeared, and then the commander himself stepped forward. The same commander who rarely visited regular recruit training. The same commander the recruits respected and feared. A wave of whispers moved through the line. "Why is he here? Someone must have messed up. No way. This is serious." Serena remained quiet, but her heartbeat thumped harder. The commander's presence meant something big. He stood in front of the trainees, his expression unreadable. His uniform was crisp, decorated with medals. When he spoke, his voice was deep and commanding. "I have been observing your progress," he said. "Today, I want to address something important." The recruits straightened. No one dared blink. The commander slowly walked down the line, his eyes scanning each recruit. When he reached the middle, he stopped. Everyone followed his gaze. He was staring directly at Serena. The whole field froze. Serena felt dozens of eyes turn toward her. Some surprised, some confused, many still not understanding how she, the girl they mocked, had reached this point. The commander stepped closer to her. "This recruit," he said loudly, "has shown exceptional strength, discipline, courage, and leadership." The words felt unreal to the others. Some recruits who once hated her shifted uncomfortably. Others simply stared with their mouths slightly open. The commander continued, his tone even stronger now. "She has completed every challenge without complaint. She has outperformed many of you, not by luck, not by chance, but through pure dedication." Serena felt her chest tighten. She had trained for years, fought through pain, ignored bullying, pushed through every doubt. Hearing these words felt like validation she had never expected. But the commander wasn't done. He turned to the entire group. "I know many of you mocked her. I know many doubted her, or dismissed her because of her size or because she is a woman." Some recruits lowered their heads. Others fidgeted, unable to meet his eyes. But Serena stood tall, not out of pride, but out of respect. The commander's voice grew even sharper. "Let me be very clear. Strength is not something you measure with weight. It is something you measure with heart." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he stepped directly in front of Serena, his face serious but not harsh. He studied her for a moment. Serena felt the entire world watching. "Recruit Serena," he said. "Step forward." She did one firm step. The commander nodded. "During the leadership test, your group was the only one to complete the mission perfectly. Your planning saved your team from detection. Your decisions were precise. And your endurance, exceptional." A few of her old critics blinked in disbelief. They had complained the entire mission. She had led silently and calmly. Then, something no one expected happened. The commander removed his glove. He raised his hand. And he saluted her. The entire training field gasped. A commander saluting a recruit? Recruits didn't get saluted. Recruits saluted officers. This was completely opposite of military tradition. But he did it anyway. He saluted her with full respect. Serena felt her breath catch. She looked at him, stunned. but quickly returned the salute with steady hands. The commander lowered his hand and spoke softly but firmly. This salute is not because you are perfect. It is because you earned it. Through discipline, resilience, and the kind of courage most people only talk about. Every recruit listened silently. No one dared say a word. He turned to the line and raised his voice. Let this moment remind you, never judge someone by what you think they are. Judge them by what they prove. Those words hit the entire unit like a shockwave. Malik looked down, guilt in his eyes. Trevor swallowed hard, regret clearly written across his face. Even the loudest recruits who once mocked Serena could not find a single word. When the commander stepped back, he said one last thing. From this day forward, she is no longer the girl you mocked. She is a soldier, a strong one, a respected one. Serena stood silently, her heart full. She didn't smile, but her eyes held a quiet fire. The fire of someone who had been doubted, mocked, pushed aside, but who chose to rise anyway. The formation ended. The recruits were dismissed. But something strange happened next. One by one, the same recruits who once bullied her walked up to her. Not with fake smiles, not with rude jokes, but with genuine respect. Malik approached first. He looked nervous, almost ashamed. Serena, I was wrong about you. Trevor followed. You earned that salute. I'm proud of you. Others nodded at her, giving her space but offering small gestures. A pat on the shoulder, a quiet good job. For the first time, no one looked at her like she didn't belong. They looked at her like she was one of them, maybe even stronger. As Serena watched them walk away, she finally felt the weight of everything she had pushed through. The pain, the doubt, the insults, it all led to this moment. A moment where the entire base froze. A moment where the commander himself honored her. A moment she would carry forever. And she knew one thing. She didn't just prove them wrong. She proved herself right.